Hey, how's it going?
What's up, Bonn Park?
How are you?
I'm good, you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about the confusion over Zoom versus in person. We just assume everyone wants to hang out in person and they have nothing to do, you know?
I would love hanging out in person. I wish. Thanks for adjusting to this. I know it's not as ideal.
No, no, it's fine. We're just happy to talk to you. So we haven't officially started yet. I'll let you know we record, but we're recording the Zoom, but we just keep the audio and we ditch the video.
Okay.
So even though you look very presentable and nice, you can
Well,
get
thank you.
relaxed and don't worry about it at all.
Yeah.
And Marshall will give you the rundown of how this goes. I'm sure you've done these before.
Yeah. We'll chat for maybe 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's really just a conversation, right? We don't write down a whole lot of stuff beforehand. Sarah sometimes does a bit. But if you find yourself and you're telling a story and you kind of lose, your place and you want to take another crack at it, just do that and Sarah will edit it beautifully together later.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
Well,
And
the mistakes are all part of it.
That's right.
You both might not know. I've been following Bonn Park for years.
Thank you so much.
I'm just happy to flow with whatever conversation happens, and I'll just infinite trust to you both.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's sometimes we forget that people are listening.
Oh, hell yeah.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Hey everybody, it's Sarah, and I'm here with Colin Hunter, who you might remember from episode 10 of Bonn Park.
Hi everybody, I'm Colin Hunter from episode 10 of Bonn Park.
We want to tell you all about a new project that we're working on.
It's called The Ref Didn't See It, and it is the first ever documentary about the unsung heroes of professional wrestling in zebra stripes, the referees.
Check us out at therefmovie.com.
That's therefmovie.com, where you can see me getting slapped around by a bunch of wrestlers.
Therefmovie.com. Check it out.
Thanks.
Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Marshall.
I'm Mike Morrice. Welcome to Bonn Park.
Thank you, Mike Morrice, for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you today.
I'm so thrilled to be with you. It's like a milestone for me to finally be on Bonn Park.
I love it. I love that you're a fan of the show. And I can't tell you how touched we were. I heard sort of after the fact that when we were at John Corbin's Amplify show at Emmanuel Church, that you had stopped Marshall and our friend Esther, who was PAing with us that day. And hi, Esther Sanchez, and sort of spread the joy. You told them all about how much you love Bonn Park and was very touched by that. I was kind of busy with cameras and mics and stuff like that. But
I told Sarah later. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really nice to hear. And I was like, "Are you talking about Mike Morrice?" So I was also starstruck.
Okay, so you both might not know. We had Midtown shows around the same time.
Yes, we did. I did know that.
You were like the upper class crust of Midtown. You had a show for so much longer. I was a rookie just trying to get started. And so I've always kind of looked up to you both for just having genuine conversations, which we need so much more of and less of the BS. And
yes.
And so we can just do this but I just really appreciate you both.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Mike.
It feels so good. And also like shout out to Midtown. They're crushing it, right?
Yeah, like they've worked so hard over so many years to give a platform to people who need it and who deserve it. And so, huge kudos to them, to the whole team. It's all volunteers, right?
Right.
And David and Danielle and so many others. So much time.
Allison, Matt.
Yeah, and Matt. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all of them. It's just incredible. And as a result, I think we've had so many different organizations and people get their voices heard. And so radio can be a force for good, and they're showing that every day.
Yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. And I love, that because it's an internet radio, they can pretty much do whatever they want. And that's something that's been really important to Marshall and I, has been control of our content. So for me, I mean, I swear a lot. You probably have heard on the podcast. It's just part of my vernacular. It's just how I speak. But I also like to talk about things that I don't fully know about. So I'm learning as we go, so we're not going to edit that out if I say something a little bit dumb, so I'm trying to learn here. But also Marshall has written for so many years, has written as Colin in the Chronicle. I think you just passed your 17-year anniversary
this month. Yeah.
Yeah. But you've always been edited.
Yeah. There's always editors, right? And there's people, many sets of eyes doing things and moving things and putting quotes on things that I don't understand. What is a quote on this now? And just Bonn Park.
Free form.
Yeah.
Let's fucking go, Did I take the words right out of your mouth?
No, I can wake up and look at it in the morning and not think, I wonder who mucked something up,
Right. Right.
Or why does this headline look like this? This doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I think so many in our community are craving that too, for more just free flowing conversation, and people like you, Sarah, who are willing to admit, I've got a lot to learn.
So much.
And lucky for me, if I can move through the day and learn a thing or two as I go along. And if folks who are listening can be learning with you, I find that, I don't know about you, but now being someone who's elected as a federal representative, if I'm not open to learning, I'm in the wrong place. There is just so much that the federal government is involved in. And so I try to hold on to that same idea every day, that I'm gonna get a chance to hear from people who know way more than me on all kinds of different topics. And lucky for me for that.
Oh my gosh, Mike, you're speaking our language totally here. I mean, there's a couple things I want to say. Number one, one of my favorite Simpsons quotes is when Bart says to, I forget which lady, one of the teachers, it's definitely not Mrs. Flanders before she passes. But anyway, he says to someone, no offense, lady, but what you don't know could fill a warehouse. And I say that about myself often when I'm like struggling with something. It's one of my favorite Simpsons quotes ever. And the other thing is I've just recently started listening to Ice-T's podcast, The Daily Game. Have either of you heard this?
No.
They're little 6-minute, 7-minute episodes.
Oh, sorry, I did hear.
You did hear.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of ads at the top. Of course, it's Ice-T. Of course, there's a bunch of ads. They're trying to like get some leverage off of it. But once you get to the meat of it, he just drops how he says. He drops some wisdom on your ass, right? So this is what he says. But a lot of the episodes have been things like, you don't know as much as you think you do. So maybe you should just sort of sit down and shut up and listen, or it's okay to admit that you're learning, or it's okay to show your weaknesses, but it's also like, don't be taken advantage of. And it's really good daily advice. But what I think is really important, how this relates to what you said, Mike, is so many of us, and I have hope for the young people, because I really see young people making an effort, but so many of us just brush politics to the side because we live a comfortable life and it doesn't affect us. And I hear a lot of people say, I'm not qualified to vote because I don't know enough about the issues. Barf, by the way. This is our job. we need to do this. Well, that doesn't affect me. So, it's not really my problem. Or, sweeping notions of we shouldn't look at police budgets because they're protecting our communities, and like just not getting into community level conversations where you have been out in the world talking to people and understanding what is affecting them and bringing those ideas to the people that matter. People
and the fact is,
the power to make decisions.
None of us are fully buffered, whether we're talking about housing. If a nurse can't afford, fine. If you own your own place and you're doing okay, well, if the nurse in your community can't afford to live here and you can't get good care when you go to the hospital, we can go down that path for any person in our community. That the reality is that decisions that are made at all levels of government, and certainly at the federal government, are going to affect every single person in our community. I believe it's on people like me to show people the value and the reason that makes it worthwhile. I won't forget anytime soon a woman who said to me in the first campaign, she said, Mike, if you're not a crook now, you'll become one if you get in. And that is,
I have a little goosebumps thinking it's terrifying.
Well, that's the reality of, I think, a number of people who are choosing not to vote because they've been let down so many times by so many people. And I think that creates a responsibility. I can only control my own behaviors and actions. I can't, I don't have any agency on those who've been elected before me, but to amplify other elected people who are doing it because they give a shit. And then for myself, try to do the same thing and to demonstrate that I'm going to try to do as much good as I can for as long as I can. And wow, there's a whole lot of opportunity as someone in the position that I'm in right now. You're taking up space. So if you're going to take up that space, what are you going to do with that. And so if someone says to me they're choosing not to vote, or they feel like they don't know the issues well enough, I usually say back, well, actually, if you've even got a question to ask, it's on people like me to demonstrate to you, to make it worth your while.
Yeah.
And I hope to make it worth someone's while, even if they don't vote Green, but that they might, get more engaged because someone actually showed up at their door and said, what do you care about?
Mm-hmm.
And tried to listen.
Yeah. I'm just gonna let you, usually we take turns, but
Right.
I have a question. Yeah, you were taking that in, I could tell.
Yeah.
All right. I want to take a second to talk about the Green vote. I'm just going to be honest with you, and I'm sure that you've heard this sentiment before, but I have been told I'm a Green voter through and through. I believe in the platform. The ideals speak to me. They align to my life. I believe that we need to have a seat at the table for some of these issues. And I've often heard this sentiment that, well, if you're not voting for the two majors, and the young people, I see a lot more young people are sort of leaning towards NDP, and I see that with teenagers that I speak to. But it's like the high school popularity contest, right? Like if I'm not voting Liberal or Conservative, people think I'm wasting my vote, and that is such a what's the word I'm looking for? Just a sweeping notion of you have to choose Coke or Pepsi. You cannot possibly have a glass of water. We don't have to do the popularity contest. We don't have to do what's always been done. And if I don't vote for what I believe in, it's like, I often hear that it's a wasted vote, right?
Yeah,
You've heard this.
Exactly what I hear.
Yeah, I hear that it's a wasted vote, but this is what I believe in. And I want at least one person to be sitting at that table speaking for me.
Well, I think what you're getting before is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, the number of times that I've spoken with a person who takes a long time to build up to those words, they're so fearful that it might be insulting.
Oh, no.
Let's be real. This is the brokenness of winner take all, first past the post, is it's forcing people into this fear-based approach. And while people like me are going to push for proportional representation, it's a pretty simple, basic idea. Every vote should count, and every person should be able to vote for, with their heart, for what they believe in, and to know that the way that we decide how we're going to count those votes is going to, make sure that their voice is heard. And you know what? More people would vote, more diverse people would get elected from all across, particularly Black, Indigenous, and racialized folks. It would be more collaborative. But in the meantime, we don't have that. And so, again, I actually see it as the responsibility of someone like myself who ran as a Green, and I can tell you more why if you want to hear about it. But as someone who ran Green, it was my job to demonstrate to our community that they could vote Green and they could win.
Mm-hmm.
And, it took us 2 rounds to do it. But for any person who now says, well, Green's a wasted vote, well, check out what Kitchener Centre did. And look at the Green vote in 2015 of 3%, and now to have the deep privilege to be representing our community in Ottawa. Our community, showed what can be done if enough people stand up and knock on doors and put out a long sign and host a community conversation. Like, it really was just one conversation at a time over the course of 4 years or so and 2 elections. The second one, of course, we could point to and say, well, last time came in second. We got a shot at this. So sometimes it takes that proof of concept to point back, and to Mike Schreiner in Guelph and what they had done. So, standing on the shoulders of giants to get to do this. But I think our community did a little bit of a lesson for the rest of the country from our community on what we can still do despite first past the post.
I love that. And you know that I can't hear the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants without thinking of REM. I feel like singing.
Of course.
Hey, if you look back at high school, were there seeds already being planted here in terms of your interests in
when you were a young person,
being part of your community? And were you already starting to think about these kind of things?
Marshall, I love the question, because if I'm really honest with you, I cared about different things. Like when I was 12 years old in Montreal, they had some kind of a bylaw banning street hockey. And so some friends and I started a petition, and, I cared about, street hockey at the time when I was 12. And, when I was in university, I was involved in campaigns on campus. One in particular where we helped to push for the university to create a sustainability office. But I never thought of running. I was always more focused on like grassroots organizing. It felt so inaccessible to me. Like when I was coming out of university, and some friends and we ended up starting Sustainable Waterloo Region. Part of the reason we did that is because we were so angry we couldn't do anything about the Climate Change Accountability Act that the Senate had just stomped on, or we couldn't hop on a plane and get to the international climate negotiations. So all that felt so inaccessible to me. I never, it's not in my family. I don't have like a political family. It really just was a mix of anger and frustration in 2018, particularly when, the federal government bought a pipeline 3 days after affirming we were in a climate emergency. And I took a step back. I read the reports from the UN on the climate crisis, the deep wealth inequality in our community and across the country, and just felt like, the best analogy I can give is that the work I was doing, I felt like I was shoveling snow off the sidewalk, and the snowplow came by and just undid everything. Yeah. And like, not that the snow shoveling, it's still important. Every bit helps, but that's what kind of shifted.
But we all know that feeling. We all know that feeling.
But anyway, it just that point of like, it was never something I was considering, but I feel so wired for it now. And I said that just to a close friend yesterday. It's like, how are you doing? How are you getting through it? And that's how I feel. I feel wired for this, and so lucky I get to do it. But it was never on my radar. Like in high school, Marshall, my high school job, I was a Zamboni driver. That was my
nice.
Fantastic job.
Well, Zamboni driver and janitor. And so I learned a thing or two. I was doing gum runs and swapping out urinal pucks. And I felt what it feels like for someone to look at me as less than. And as a bald white guy, I don't often get to feel that, and how important that is to have that experience of feeling less for no good reason. But yes, I also got to drive the Zamboni and wave every now and then at a junior A game that I would never have a chance to play in, but I can at least clean the ice.
Hey, I've noticed recently that the urinal pucks are gone and in places, but rather are replaced by these rubbery, spiky kind of things that look more like a sensory toy or something.
Oh, have you picked them up and touched them? No, I've never seen a urinal up close, really. Well, I've seen the like Marcel Duchamp one in the MoMA, but
maybe there's better places we can innovate, but that's capitalism for you.
Hopefully they're more eco-friendly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's some truth there. We are in a water crisis, and there's various places. Washrooms are one place we can do more to address the water crisis. That's for sure.
Oh, totally. I think it's something that we all take for granted because it is such a luxury and a privilege and a tool that we enjoy in our life of abundance in Waterloo Region, that water is just at our literal disposal. And people forget we've got our groundwater festival, and we've got all of these lovely things. I was just talking to Misty Brown of the Region of Waterloo about this. We've got all these lovely, campaigns to let people know that we have to protect our groundwater, but I don't know if people really get it. We only have the water in our ground as our source here. That's it.
And the more I learn, the more I need to understand better on water science and groundwater and storm water. Groups like Read Green Solutions are doing so much to help people understand it better. And also, if we're going to get real on water, let's be real about the fact that we have Indigenous communities across the country who still have boil water advisories. And that's not to say that there's not some progress being made there. But I think, when I turn the tap on and just know that that's going to be drinking water that I don't have to boil first. We're still in a country where that's not always the case. And it's on all of us to keep putting pressure on elected people to say it's not okay. Sorry to be a downer, but
nope.
That's the reality for Canada right now. Is it's not only do we have communities that are still under drinking water advisories, but as some get cleared, new ones keep popping up because it's less, I think, politically attractive to invest in the operations, the ongoing maintenance than it is to lift an advisory. So it doesn't matter where you turn. There's so much, injustice that we can fight.
I'll be like, it's okay to be a downer about this because it is a downer issue, and I think that we need to shed a lot more light on it. Before I knew that about Indigenous communities in Canada, I used to sort of run off at the mouth saying, like, I can't believe the States is letting this problem in Flint, Michigan go on year after year. Like, fix it already. You've got the money. What the hell? And then I found out we're doing the same thing. And I was like, holy shit. I had no idea, and I wasn't doing the research, and I wasn't finding this out on my own. And it wasn't presented to me in a flashy manner to bring the issue to light, and it really should be. This should be in everybody's face.
Well, and if it was the case in Waterloo region that we couldn't drink the water, like what would, you can just do your own thought exercise.
I'm starting to think of the first neighborhoods that would cry, right? So, I mean, it would be solved immediately.
There's a thing there about political power and environmental racism. There's plenty there. I guess one of the outcomes, though, is that for all of us to keep pushing. And again, there has been progress made. I don't mean to say I think the current governing party has made some progress to at least reduce the number. But until we're at zero, it's not good enough. Yeah. So we're going to keep pushing.
Mike, you've been working through a battle with cancer. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, my
on
surgery
the other side
was. Of it? Yeah. Well, 5 years out of surgery, my risk levels are higher than someone who is not currently in a cancer journey. So 5 years is a really important mark. Once I get there, then I can say that I just came from an event this morning with the Canadian Cancer Society with other MPs to be pushing on the reality that pretty much 1 in every 2 Canadians are going to have a cancer diagnosis at some point in their life. So in my case, it was stage 1 testicular. And my surgery was late October of 2019. So I'm 3.5 years out now. I was just at Grand River last week for my most recent set of blood work, and I've received great care there. And I got another 1.5 years to go, and then I can say I'm on the same level as the rest of the population.
Right on.
How do you keep fighting through important work? I mean, I hate when people ask me this question. Now, I have not, I'm going to knock on wood, had a cancer journey, thankfully, but I kind of do hate when people ask me, you're up to so many things. How do you do it? How do you do it all? I'm like, I don't know. You just do it. You got to do stuff. So you just keep moving forward, but I'm asking you this question.
No, I think, first caveat is like, I'm so fortunate we caught it so early. So, and it was testicular too. So of all the forms of cancer, this is the one that's most treatable. My prognosis was among the best. That's what I told my parents, right? As soon as I had to relay the news to them. But I think at the core of it, if I'm real with you, this is why, so cliches are sometimes true. Mm-hmm. And there's a cliche about how important it is to like look inside and have a deep sense of calling. Well, like I got my diagnosis in the middle of the 2019 campaign. I was knocking on doors in July of 2019, and I was losing weight. And that was part of what had me go into the doctor. I wasn't sure if it was because I was just out so often and walking so much. And that led to an ultrasound, and I got the news in August. But even my doctor said to me at the time, I remember he closed the door and he said, Mike, even a receptionist here has a lawn sign. I know you've got a chance to win this election. It's up to you. If you want to do a surgery, we can make time for it in a week's time, or we can put it off until the election's done. And I guess point being for me is I think when a person has this deep sense of calling, life will get hard in all kinds of ways, in small and large ones. And a cancer diagnosis is a larger one. But when life gets harder, it's that sense of calling that for me has pushed me through. So even if I've only got 3 months left, what else would I rather be doing than get to be on the floor of the House of Commons talking about the housing crisis and the climate crisis and standing up for people? Like, I get to live my best life doing this work. And so it never felt like, why, like, there's nothing resilient about it. It's a deep privilege for me to get to do this. And I don't know how long I've got it. Like, none of us actually do. That's just a fact of life.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah. Mike, when you're knocking on doors, as someone whose family has 2 electric vehicles, I've had thousands of spontaneous conversations with people in parking lots. I get asked almost every day about.
And you're happy to talk about it.
So I'm happy to talk about it. But there's also people out there who are looking for contradictions and have resistance to them. You know what I mean?
Let's
and
fight about your electric car.
Yeah, they seem much more concerned about what happens at the end when the lithium battery dies, and well, it's not really all completely eco-friendly, and what. They're looking for reasons to not like the electric vehicles. You must have heard some of this, eh?
Of course, there's a significant amount of embodied carbon in an electric vehicle for sure. But my response to that is, well, yes, that's why we need to be investing in active transportation, in safe places for people to be able to walk, in cycling infrastructure, in transit. There are so many solutions. Electric vehicles are not the only one. They're one of many. And it's part of the mix. But we got to invest in a whole lot more. And we need to ensure that every person is given better options than driving alone in an internal combustion engine powered car. And that's not the case right now. Why is it that, we're not seeing more investments in public transit, for example? There's various vested interests at play there. So I think it's all part of it. But the other part of the question that I was hearing you get at there, Marshall, is the magic, I think, of meeting someone for the first time and getting into something of meaning to them. And if for them it's fighting about EVs, fine. But actually what I find far more often is it's a person. I was actually just last Sunday afternoon, I was out in Victoria Hills. And within a couple hours, I had someone tell me about their mom's cancer journey, for example. Someone else share about their own experience in the healthcare system. Someone else share about a brother that was in Syria that they needed help getting to safety. Someone I'm meeting for the first time, and within a couple of minutes, someone might be in tears or, be sharing something of meaning to them. Sure, every now and then someone might slam their door because they say, well, as the woman I shared earlier, you're a politician, get off my lawn, fine. But the vast majority of people, there is something pretty magic about meeting someone for the first time and getting to something that really matters to them. And so I'm all in for that. But if you want to talk about EVs, I'm happy to do that too.
No, not at all. I just think about the kind of conversations that you're having. You must be up against resistance at times. And I'm talking about the kind of resistance that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? My family are also vegetarian. That's not hard to anger somebody over that for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, but let's also then talk about the various forces in our society who are looking to push all this stuff about the World Economic Forum, for example, and Klaus Schwab. And there are various people and organizations that are seeking to destabilize our discourse and in bad faith ways. And I hear that too. I hear something parroted on the floor of the House of Commons, then get, a dozen or so emails about it. And then someone tells me that they wonder if I'm some way hired by the World Economic Forum. This is real. And I don't put it on that person. I think about the forces that have sought to plant those seeds because they've got a vested interest of some kind. And so then I get a chance to actually listen to where that person's coming from, understand, maybe ask a good question in response. Really, what it all comes down to is I think if we had more people who were elected who believed in using their empathy as opposed to just, Trump, thumping with a message, we'd get a whole lot further in terms of trying to dispel all of the bad faith arguments, let alone someone who might have, a really different perspective. I'm all in for that. I think we need to be having that. This whole idea that we can disagree without being disagreeable, I think is, again, another kind of cliche that there's some truth behind that once we lose that, well, then we're just into our own camps and echo chambers and all the rest. And that's a far worse option.
Especially online.
Oh, how
Right?
easy is that?
Yeah.
I think Sarah pointed out to me that Mike Farwell's social media says something like, I'm just going to paraphrase something like, our opinions may differ, but that doesn't make you wrong. And is that okay?
Yeah.
kind of thing, just.
Well,
it's not quite like that.
No, but no, and I'm not correcting you, but to the point of what Mike was saying, and you as well, Marshall, is I've always said to friends, like when you make a new friend, sometimes there's always this like part in getting to know each other where they're sort of testing their opinions and they sort of say, I'm sorry, that differs from what you think. And I'm like, well, if we all thought the same thing, this would be very boring. Yeah. This would not be interesting at all. I want to get to know other people. I want, like, what we do here on the show is not too different. I mean, this is going to sound a little pompous. The conversations that we're having are not very different than what you're doing, Mike. It just, you can affect change on our behalf. But, we've talked to a representative Swan Waterloo about decriminalizing sex work. We've talked to Salam Debs about racism. We've talked to, Kate Ellis about her cancer journey. We've talked to so many people about so many different things just to learn about our community. And we're not going to agree with everyone on every topic, but Marshall and I and our listeners are going to walk away that much richer for the experience of getting to know somebody else's life.
And isn't that true? Like, of our closest friends, if we each take heart to the idea that life is short and we don't know how much time we've got, then let's cut through the BS and talk about the real stuff. Yes. If this is our last conversation.
Yes.
And so let's not undersell, though, the joint advocacy. That when you platform someone like Salam Debs to speak about her lived experience of racism in our community and the education that she's doing, that is just as important as an elected person doing the same thing, and all of the emotional labor that Salam herself is putting in. And so I think, that's, again, the value of radio and the value of the media. And the media is, yes, it's CBC, but it's also Bonn Park.
Thank you.
And when we platform those voices, we raise up the issues that matter to them. And that's important for our democracy too. And it's important when we have, small group conversations just as well too, that we can cut through this. Well, yeah, there's a bit of small talk. Fine. I love talking about hockey too, for example. But if we can get to the good stuff, and if you can help do that for our community, that's a service.
Thank you. Getting to know each other and getting to know the differences in each other is imperative to a community, right? And like, people might not know this, but Marshall and I disagree on a lot of stuff. And these are conversations we have off mic. And sometimes we laugh it off afterwards and we'll say, this should be our show. Yeah. People would tune in for this stuff, but it's not. It's not what the idea of our show is. But we disagree on so many things, and we've had we've known each other for years, but over the last 4 years of creating this show, working closely together and meeting new people and learning new things, we've had a lot of tough conversations. Yeah, for sure. But it just makes me love Marshall more. It makes me understand his family more. It makes me understand his life more.
Yeah, we've never once stormed away from each other and gone home and given the silent treatment.
Oh God, no. If anything, the opposite. It brings us closer together.
Yeah, we've had so many experiences too with our guests where just all of a sudden somebody can reveal something to you and you just look at the world a whole different way. Yeah. There's a wonderful book that recently came out we talked about on our other podcast, our wrestling podcast.
Oh, we love our wrestling podcast.
And this author, she really put a spotlight on this idea that there are people out there like Donald Trump who if you're okay with, most of us have some issue with lying, right? It doesn't feel good. But there are people out there who are capable of just outright lying and making up their own narrative and creating their whole image based on lots of lies and lots of bullshit. And you can go pretty far with that if you don't have that dilemma and that sick feeling in your stomach, like some of us do when it comes to lying, right?
Right. I want to shout out Abraham Reisman in her book, Ringmaster, about Vince McMahon, because we had I don't like that word very much. We had a very interesting conversation with her about Vince McMahon's life and about this idea of lying and believing your own lies.
Yeah. So it connects Vince McMahon of the WWE to Donald Trump, who's a friend, and how incredibly similar they are, and how they have found themselves in very similar situations too.
And how people buy in.
Yeah.
And so how some people buy in just to watch the circus.
Yeah.
Yeah. We said a lot there. What was our question?
Well, but let's there's something there about also who we choose to spend time with.
Yeah.
Because I think there's something to be said about sharing values. And, if I'm in a space like the House of Commons, there are people here who I disagree very strongly with. And I will not shy away from being assertive about, when we're sending billions of dollars to oil and gas companies in the midst of a climate crisis, they're already making money hand over fist. I think it's really important to still, you want to use the language, to speak truth to power, to be assertive, to make clear that we can vehemently disagree. And in my personal life, I might choose not to have that person as my closest friend. You're putting work in together because you've got a connection and maybe values alignment that makes it worth putting in that work when you don't agree.
Yeah.
In my case, when I don't agree with someone here in the House of Commons, I might not choose to have that person in my personal life and go for a beer afterwards. Right. But I can still make a choice about how I'm going to disagree with them and try to surface what I might feel is a bad faith argument that they might be making, and why they might be making that argument to in the interest of our community. And so I guess there is that nuance there when it comes to how we disagree, who we're spending time with, and how we seek to resolve conflict or lift up someone's voice, I guess.
Or Mike, I don't know if you had an experience like this. When I was a teenager, my brother, who's 13 years my senior,
Hi, David.
Yeah, David's an ecology professor at University of Guelph. Anyways, David pointed out to me how when certain pesticides started to be banned, that there were lawn maintenance businesses that got incredibly angry and were completely against this idea. And David explained to me, this is completely money motivated. They're not interested. They don't want to hear about it. The fact that it's threatening their business and how much money they're making, this is a huge problem for them. And that was very eye-opening for me. That was the beginning of me realizing we're going to have people out there who completely resist common sense change
because of money.
Because of money.
Always.
Yeah. Do you remember kind of your first experiences realizing these things?
Well, you might know, before I was elected, when I was at Sustainable Water of the Region, the whole approach was to work with businesses who were voluntarily willing to step up and set targets to reduce their emissions. And part of the reason why I ran is that while that work is important, it's not going to be enough. We're not going to get there fast enough if we don't also address the mandatory side of the work that needs to be done. And the fact is, when elected people look to put mandatory regulations or legislation in place, of course, there's going to be pushback from various vested interests who economically will not benefit from that. And for me right now, one of the best examples of that is the oil and gas industry. And it's not language that, I don't seek out conflict as a person, but I think we need to be clear that we have various industries that are playing by the rules they are given, and they are lobbying government to maintain those rules. In doing so, they are putting their corporate greed ahead of my nieces and nephews' future on this planet. And that was true of tobacco years ago, and it's certainly true of the oil and gas industry today. And what that means is that we actually need to be standing up for and speaking alongside the workers. That we need to make sure that we push back on notions from other elected people who've been lobbied by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, for example, who get a disproportionate amount of time with various ministers in Ottawa and I'm sure in other jurisdictions across the country. We need to make sure that we're pushing back on false narratives they're putting up for their economic interest, because our community's interest is more important. And to do that, we need to make sure we're offering better arguments too. Here's one of the facts around politics is that elected people are usually elected in short-term cycles. And when we think about changing a system, we need long-term thinking. And so it's often much more difficult for an elected person to propose a solution that's got a long-term benefit for you and I when they're thinking about their next election in less than 4 years, or corporations who are thinking about their profits in the next 4 months. And so we need elected people who are willing to say, you know what, it's in the workers' best interest in the oil and gas industry, for example, to stop subsidizing the majority foreign-owned oil and gas company and put that money in supporting that worker to have a prosperous future, because that's what they actually care about. But that's a much more nuanced conversation. And so the short of it, Marshall, is of course there's vested interests that are going to push back. And we need to be willing to have conversations like this to try to call out the clarity in what they're saying.
Something that feels really good is I've supported Vincenzo's here in town for many, many years. I shop there every week. Yeah. And CTV approached them as soon as news came out that of the banning of plastics, right? And asked the owner, Carmen Cachopoli, about how's this going to work at Vincenzo's, right? Lots of like, how do you put your, what do you do with your olives and all these things that require plastic? And he was fantastic. He said, we'll have to figure it out, like,
yeah, plain and simple.
We're going to find new ways. And he wasn't flinching. He didn't have any kind of concern about it. He just was open to the conversation, and he could see change was coming, and there will be a different way that I take my olives home, right?
And he's amazing for saying that. What are people like myself doing to make sure that he's got a lower cost alternative to provide a person? This is, again, where we have perverse incentives, whether it's in housing or climate or plastics. There are various perverse incentives in place that make it more difficult for that small business owner to do what might be the right thing. And what I learned years ago is we're going to have folks like Vincenzo's who are going to do the right thing regardless. And we're lucky for that. How do we make sure we also have legislation and incentives in place for those that might not be voluntarily choosing the right thing, that we make it in their best interest to do so too? That's we got to push on both. Plastics, Marshall, it's a great example, because we all know, the plastics that end up in the oceans, but we've got to give people better options. And, again, various elected people have chosen to mislead on this issue over many, many years. The fact is, garbage is something that we made up as humans. Everywhere else, waste is energy. It's a cycle. We chose to break that cycle. We chose to mix chemicals in certain ways. Well, we can also choose to close that cycle. And the faster we do it, the better off for all of us.
And you speak about the oceans, and this is such a great point that you made, Mike, but you speak about the oceans. And if we want to bring that down to like a more local level, we spoke 3 years ago, maybe, to Kathleen Barsoom, was it? Mm-hmm. At Region Waterloo Waste Management.
Yeah.
Up the street from here.
We did a tour. Yeah.
We did a tour. We learned a lot. Actually, I learned about some things I had been recycling improperly. So always learning. And she sort of said, bring it back to basics. Use your jars, reuse your peanut butter jar, do all these sorts of things. But if we're talking about a local level, and we're talking about our groundwater, and we're talking about taking care of the space that we live in here, we have a major Waterloo region is a Windy City problem with recycling, right? Like those plastics are flying around this town like nobody's business. And it's really, I don't think it's so much litter as it is the blue bins overflowing. Wind is knocking them over. People aren't picking these things up, because we see it in our neighborhood a lot.
Oh yeah.
And then of course, when the Ford government, they made cuts, and we used to get funding for our Clare Hills Community Association. We used to get funding for our annual neighborhood cleanup, and we would get garbage bags and gloves and things like that to do this sort of cleanup. But that was cut, and now it's sort of on do it yourself and tweet it level, which is fine. They're trying the best that they can. But when these tools are provided to the neighborhood, people seem to show up more when me or Marshall are at a table at the end of the street saying, hey, neighbor, come over and get this stuff and clean up your area. Just try it or take this section. People seem to make a bigger effort. And again, that's more marketing and, getting to know your neighbors and getting people out there to do that. But on the local level, a lot of this litter is just a recycling issue for sure. And recycling is a whole other issue. I get it about energy and waste and whatnot, but that's going into our stormwater management systems. It's going into the Grand River. It's making a mess everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's again, to me, it goes back to advocacy again. We can be advocating to elected people to increase the amount of plastics that are eligible in municipal systems to be recycled. But also, let's not forget that reduce and reuse come first. Mm-hmm. And anyone I've ever spoken to in this industry is the first to tell me that our rates, it's always most difficult when we try to increase the recycling rates, and we need to continue to do that, but also giving people options that allow them to reuse. And we've got more and more companies who are providing reusable plastic options as a place to start. We need to be providing more composting options in multi-tenant facilities, for example, an apartment building. We need to make sure that people have the option to compost option as well. And let's reducing our consumption is another part of it too.
And other places are doing this so much better. Like I have a good friend, hi Justina, who just came back from a sabbatical in Switzerland. And when she came back, she said, it's so funny. I forgot that plastic clamshells existed. I haven't seen one for months and months. So here they are buying everything that they need at the market and the store and getting ready to do things with their family, making their dinner, whatever. And they didn't see a single plastic clamshell in this entire time.
Right.
So it's possible.
Yeah. 100%.
Do you want to do wrap up?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, you want to reflect kind of on the fact, you came through Wilfrid Laurier University, right? You did 2 majors. Is that right?
Yes, I had such a good experience at Laurier. I did a double degree there in business and computer electronics. So like robot building and business planning.
Smarty pants stuff.
So that's what I wanted you to reflect on how, you found your way to this part of your career. Sarah and I talk about this all the time. The path you sometimes avoid is the one you end up taking. But can you just kind of take us, wrap this up by taking us on a little kind of in a nutshell journey of how Wilfrid Laurier kid basically came to the place you are now?
Well, I feel fortunate. So I came to our community for Wilfrid Laurier. I know relationship I was in at the time in high school. But to think I came to our community because I felt like this was its own community. I grew up in Montreal and went to high school in Newmarket, Ontario. And when I was thinking about university, I didn't know much of what I wanted to do in life, but I knew I wanted to be a part of a community that had its own identity. And Laurier had a program that at the time seemed exciting to me. And Waterloo Region seemed like its own thing, close enough, but far enough from Toronto that it had its own identity. And if I'm real with you, the reason I stayed is the people. It's when I was coming out of university and I was upset about climate and I had this idea of a business plan that became a nonprofit. I had profs and people at the university who rallied around it and supported me and brought this. We had this wild vision, a bunch of people in their early 20s with no experience, with this big idea of trying to take climate action in our community, and people rallied around it. And then when we said, okay, we're going to try to take this thing across the country because people are asking about it, again, people in our community rallied. And then when I came forward and said, well, if we're going to be honest about the change we need to be doing more in terms of federal legislation. And again, our community rallied. And I think there's something there about the willingness to take risks, about people who care about each other, about people who are choosing to take risks to support someone else's vision because they believe in that person and what that person is trying to do. Those are the reasons why I'm really proud of our community. And I think that's a big part of why I get to be doing what I'm doing right now. And now I'm in a position where a big part of my work every day is contributing to that, is giving a platform to people in our community who are raising the alarm on significant issues, whether it's people with disabilities who are living in legislated poverty, whether it's a high school student who needs some more support for their mental health, whether it's a senior who tells me that they can't afford their rent. These are the people who I'm now in a position to lift up and to fight alongside them to push for better. And that's actually why I stayed in our community in the first place. So for me, it kind of feels full circle. It's kind of a circuitous route, but it's a privilege to get to do this. And I'm really proud of the ways our community has always kind of lifted up other voices. You're both doing that every day on Bonn Park. It's a big part of why I was so excited to get to be with you. And I'm going to keep doing that as I can here in Ottawa too.
Nice. Thank you.
That's a perfect wrap up. That's where we'll fade the music in.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Mike. This was fun. There's so much we could have talked about, but I love where it went.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we covered a lot, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. Thanks for having me.
Bonn Park is made possible with the support of the Waterloo Region Community Foundation, the Kitchener Public Library, our local sponsors, and you, our loyal listeners.
We make this show in Sarah's kitchen. If you like it, please rate and subscribe.
That helps us get the word out to more listeners.
The Bonn Park theme song is by Alan Lung. Sarah and I are super excited for season 4 and all the amazing shows we're going to bring you.
We're also really excited about our secret side podcast called An Unscripted Spectacle, Wrestling with Wrestling. And it's not actually about wrestling.
No, it isn't. It's about a lot of things.
Mostly life.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of laughter.
Yeah, there's tons and tons of laughter.
We're incredibly proud of it. So please check it out on all your streaming platforms. An unscripted, I can't say it. Can you say it?
An unscripted spectacle, wrestling with wrestling. Meow, 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 meow.